Hello, this is Laura Richcreek with Laura's Voice. Welcome to Laura Reads Foxed Books. This week we meet another of Nancy's misdemeanors, men, and get a glimpse into Bobby's inner thoughts. What might that be about in Chapter 6, Out of the West? Chapter 6, Out of the West. You haven't heard about the Texan, Bobby. I've been improving the shining hours while you idled at Palm Beach. Out upon you, drone.
One more unfortunate?
Asked the man who came often.
Where is the victim?
Nancy sighed. I don't know.
But, gracious powers, I've been gone only a week. Don't tell me you've allowed a guilty man to escape.
Bobby's tone was distinctly hopeful. He longed to hear that some resolute fellow had resisted Nancy's wiles and vindicated his sex. Nancy's upper lip took on a pathetic droop. It is an interesting upper lip. It smiles and weeps, and is angry before any other part of the face wakens. He stayed only one day, the young woman said mournfully, and things were just becoming so interesting.
I could love that Texan like a brother,
murmured Bobby fervently. But he made considerable progress while he was here, twinkled Nancy. They do these things better in Texas. They evidently understand the value of time down there. Their ideas don't develop by geological formation. They are quick on the trigger, these Texans.
It's a habit they contract through social relations with horse thieves, said the man who came often. Did this Texan drop from a clear sky, or did he blow in with Buffalo Bill?
The Rollinses captured him. Then they didn't know what to do with such big game, so they sent for me. Mrs. Rollins wrote a most beseeching note. She said Jim, that's her husband, you know, was mixed up with this Texan in some big deal, and they had to do things for him. They were to dine at Delmonico's that night, and she really couldn't bear the brunt alone. She was sure I could put the man at his ease, and she would be everlastingly indebted to me if I would come to her rescue. But she feared she was imposing on me, for Jim said the guest was intensely Western. Now, Bobby, Mrs. Rollins was a Bostonian before she fell from grace and married a New York man. I knew that what Jim probably did say was that the Texan was a corker, a wild and woolly Indian. That's Jim's style, but translation into Bostonese does soften the outlines of language. I had been awfully dull. You really shouldn't leave town in Lent, Bobby. I call it inconsiderate.
It's a season for fasting, protested Bobby.
Well, I've always insisted that self-mortification can be carried too far. I'd rather see consistent self-denial throughout the year than one orgy of asceticism. That's why I don't allow you to come as often as you'd like during the season, and I don't mind giving you up on Fridays during Lent. But one must have some amusement for the rest of the week evenings, and there's nothing going on. You were at Palm Beach. I needed entertainment. Enter Texan. I call that excellent stage management. The only trouble was that the curtain was hurried. In the words of the poet, I only knew he came and went. I wrote to Mrs. Rollins and told her I would be glad to oblige her. It wasn't necessary to say that I regarded her as an angel benefactress, but I did. She and Mr. Rollins called for me at 6:45. When we drove up to the porte-cochere, a man who was standing on the steps threw away a cigar, bowled the carriage-man out of the way as if he had been a 10-pin, and opened the door for us. He was glad to meet us. He said Rollins had proved what he thought of Mrs. Rollins by marrying her, and had said I was the real thing, and he had lots of confidence in Rollins' judgment, so he reckoned our references were good. He'd about come to the conclusion we were short on appetite. Dinner had been waiting for him since 12 o'clock. They always had noon dinners in Wahoo. A New York woman went down there once and had late dinners. She wanted her cook to come to the door and say, "Dinner is served," but the cook drew the line right there. Finally, some Eastern Syndicate men were to dine at the house, and the missus told the cook she'd have to announce dinner or chuck her job. This isn't my vocabulary, Bobby, it's the Texans. Everybody was sitting in the parlor at 6:30 that evening when the door opened, and Mammy stuck her head in, looking scared to death.
"Say, folks, your dinner's dished," she yelled. Then she slammed the door and ran. He told us all this while we were going up the steps. He hadn't a comma concealed about him. Breezy? A 50-mile-an-hour gale is a dead calm compared with him, Bobby. He had a voice that wasn't exactly loud, but had a queer ringing quality that made it carry wonderfully. I never met clarion tones outside of a poem, but I guess those were clarion tones. He said he had tuned up his pipes riding round and round bunches of cattle and singing to them to keep them from stampeding. His voice was so fresh and clear that it would have been beautiful on a 30,000-acre range, but there seemed to be rather too much of it for Delmonico's. Everybody turned to look at the man and grinned. "Is this the modest, shrinking Violet I was to put at ease?" I asked Mrs. Rollins in the cloakroom. She only groaned. Boston and Texas have no points of contact. Now, I thought the man delicious. As for being made conspicuous, well, I had on my pink cloth. That gown could stand the bright white light that beat upon the Texan and his party. We found a table. Bill dominated the room. No, I didn't call him Bill, but that's what the boys call him in Texas, and it fits him much better than his conventional title. Bobby, he was the biggest thing I've ever seen. He was miles high, and broad proportionately, and yet he didn't seem to have an ounce of superfluous flesh. He looked as though he had been made out of whalebone and rawhide. Everything about him worked on springs. I wouldn't have been surprised to see him pull out a 6-shooter and begin snuffing the candles, or get up and play leapfrog over the tables. It was like playing with an electric dynamo to associate with him. He seemed to have limitless possibilities of explosion. I never realized before how smooth-running and colorless the ordinary man is. No one else in the room tried to talk. Our wild man from Wahoo held the floor, from oysters to coffee. He didn't pay much attention to Mrs. Rollins, and he dropped Mr. Rollins with the entree. After that, my only rival was the head waiter. The conversation was addressed to us. Bill's vocabulary wasn't like any English I knew, but we always seemed to catch his meaning. So did the waiters. So did everybody in the room except an exquisite Frenchman who sat at one of the tables near us and stared at the Texan as if hypnotized. I'd like to read that Frenchman's Impressions d'Amérique. We'll be in it. Bill wasn't wearing evening clothes, but he didn't care. His foot was on his native heath, and he patronized us all, including the head waiter. I've always been afraid of that head waiter myself, and I felt that I could love a man who wasn't awed by him. We had a vanishing procession of waiters all evening. One came and stood by the table, looking like a wooden image, until, suddenly, his face began to twitch, and he showed signs of apoplexy. Then he fled to save his professional reputation, and another took his place. The continuous performance bothered Bill, and he called the head waiter. "Old man," he said, "your boys aren't on to their job. It makes me dizzy, this trying to keep track of our man. You ought to get black men. They'll bear watching, but they beat anything for waiting on table. I used to have a black man in Texas. A black man and a Chinese man. They ran the shack, and say, they were the smoothest combination I ever saw." I wish you could have seen that head waiter, Bobby. He looked most unhappy. His dignity was tottering to a fall, and yet he wanted to stay and see the thing through. Duty triumphed. He tore himself away. Our Texan was disappointed. He liked that head waiter. Said he had an expression a good deal like that of a friend of his who was shot in a little card-table difficulty last fall. "Nothing could make a muscle of Jack's face quiver," he added. The head waiter being gone, he finished his story for my benefit. The black man and the Chinese man stole him blind, Bobby, but they certainly did make him comfortable while they were doing it. They would do anything, including Bill. They fell over each other to wait on him. Then when he went away, they fell over each other running for loot. John worked harder, but Sam was smoother. The black man generally got there first, but the Chinese man was thorough when he did arrive. Bill had the finest driving horse in that part of the country. Sam used to hitch up that horse the moment his master's back was turned, and take his dusky damsels driving. John went one better. He couldn't get the horse as often as Sam did, but when he did get him,
He took the horse and buckboard out to the camp meeting 2 miles from town and hired them out at 25 cents a drive. He was thrifty, that Chinese man. I hope you are interested, Bobby.
Absorbingly interested. It strikes me that for once in a way, a man is starring and you are only leading lady. It's refreshing. Your plays aren't usually cast that way.
Look at Bernhardt in Roxanne. I, too, can be noble. I dare say, though, that she thinks L'Aiglon and Hamlet are dramas greater than Cyrano. Well, to go back to domestic affairs in the shack, Bill finally got hot and fired the whole shooting match. That's the way he put it.
After they had gone, he said, I found there wasn't much left. I hadn't a stitch of clothes except what I chanced to be wearing. It was big luck that I happened to have on a coat that day. Still, you ought to have black men here. These gentlemen with sky-blue upper lips don't know the game.
He was beautiful, Bobby. I wanted to buy him so that I could take him out and play with him whenever life grew dull. One would need a strong box for him between whiles, though. I smiled on him. My very best smile.
Poor lucky beggar,
commented Bobby paradoxically. I urged him on. I've never seen anything so untrammeled, so sublimely unconscious as that Texan. He hadn't an idea that he was attracting attention. I expected him to make breaks about the dinner. He didn't. He took the weird French concoctions as calmly as if his black man and Chinese man had served them to him every day down in the Texan shack. There wasn't even a touch of awkwardness about him. He would sit down at a royal table with cheerful unconcern. I'm sure of it. It's fine, Bobby. That vigorous, direct manhood that looks clear-eyed at life and sees only the realities. I wonder if it takes broad horizons and broader freedom to make such men. Do we raise them here, between brick walls?
We breed the strength and the sincerity here sometimes. Never the freedom,
said the man who came often, and Nancy missed the smile from his voice. There were times when the Bobby whom she teased suddenly grew up and made her feel very young and foolish. She never encouraged the pose, but in her heart she liked it. The normal woman will look up to a man even if she has to sit down in order to do it. Still, being a woman, Nancy tacked and bore away from seriousness. We took him to the theater, she went on lightly. He kept quiet while the curtain was up, but between the acts he entertained everyone within 6 rows of us. He didn't rave over the star. She couldn't hold a candle to me. In fact, he hadn't seen anyone who could. He thought I'd like Texas. The prettiest girl in Wahoo had miles of cowponies hitched in front of her place every evening, and she couldn't even be entered in the same class with me. Subtle, wasn't it? And yet, Bobby, somehow or other it wasn't banal or vulgar. He said I was pretty, just as he would have said that grass is green or that skies are blue. I knew he believed what he said, and since it was true, he couldn't see any reason for wrapping it round with subtleties. The compliment of civilization is one of the most perfect exponents of decadence, Bobby. It is a concession to false ideas of delicacy. It says, if I speak directly, she will know I'm lying. I must be discreet. A direct compliment isn't vulgar if it is genuine. We consider all direct compliments vulgar. You can draw your own conclusions.
Nancy, said the man who came often, speaking with slow deliberation, you have the most adorable eyes and the most kissable lips I ever beheld. I'll swear to it before a notary. Therefore, you have no right to resent my direct, unvarnished statement.
He caught a cushion dexterously and scored one.
Let us return to our simple and guileless friend, William, he urged.
Of course you wouldn't understand him, said Nancy hotly. He would have little in common with a New York broker.
But I gather from your story that William and I have much in common, objected Bobby. Our opinion of your eyes and lips, for instance.
He didn't mention my eyes or lips.
Then he isn't the man I took him for. I'm afraid this new friend of yours merely goes in for glittering generalities. A man of specialized detail is the man to tie to, Nancy. What did he mention?
He told me about Texas. He actually lowered his voice to do it. And Bobby, do you know, he positively made me homesick for the place. He could make one feel the sweep and the breadth and the freedom of it, and I wanted to breathe. But I smoothed my Paris frock and played with my lorgnette chain and tried to remember that New York probably wears better than Wahoo. He was born 27 miles from Wahoo, Bobby. Isn't that awful? To be born in Wahoo is bad enough, though I don't know anything about the place except its name. But to be born 27 miles from Wahoo, that opens up a dismal vista of desolation and isolation. We left him in front of the theater. He held my hand quite a long time.
"Didn't kiss you good night?"
inquired Bobby briskly. Nancy flushed angrily. "He certainly did not."
"Oh, tut-tut. A Texan and a feared? And he's so simple and direct in his methods, too. What about the next day?"
"Well, the next morning before I was up, Mary staggered in with a perfect cartload of American beauties, and while I was dressing, a 5-pound box of chocolates came."
"In their ultimate form of expression, all methods of courtship look alike to me,"
mused Bobby. Then, just as I was breakfasting, Bill was announced. He came out and watched me drink coffee. He wasn't in the least embarrassed by finding that he had called before breakfast. He had been up for 5 hours, and he looked preternaturally wide awake, but he didn't talk so much as he did the night before. I did most of the talking.
"Probably he had just discovered that your innocent prattle has its good points. Did you talk to him about other men? I have a taste for that sort of thing, a carefully cultivated taste. But some men are unreasonable and primitive in their tastes. I've an idea your Texan wouldn't enjoy hearing about other men."
"We talked about ideals and things." Bobby nodded understandingly.
"Yes, I know those ideals."
"He has the most beautiful ideas about women."
"That isn't indigenous to Texas, Nancy. It's eternal masculine. It's a feature of the universal kingdom of youth."
"You are getting old, Bobby."
"I have ideas about a woman instead of having ideas about women. That's the only difference."
"But my Texan was awfully interesting," said Nancy hastily. "We went for a walk in the park. He didn't like it. He said he would butt his head against the biggest tree he could find and go mad if that were all the country within his reach. I don't think I ever saw a man fret against things before."
"We do our fretting inside in the effete East."
"No, you don't fret that way. You are used to things."
"Men are never used to things, little girl. Men endure things."
Nancy shook her head. Women seldom understand. We went riding together in the afternoon. He borrowed Mr. Rollins' saddle horse, but he wasn't very grateful. He said it looked well, but that it wasn't bridle-wise, and that it had a gait like a tipsy camel. He breathed fire when I wouldn't ride fast, because it would be conspicuous and the police wouldn't approve. And he thought the men and women on trotting horses were horrors. He said the Lord's original plan kept me from looking foolish, but that he'd like to pick me up and carry me down to the ranch and teach me to ride. Shades of my German riding master, and I was a star pupil. I'd like to ride across that ranch, though, Bobby, with a good cow pony under me, and the prairie billowing off to the horizon line on every side of me, and the birds whirring out of the buffalo grass at my feet, with no noise but the thud of the horses' hoofs, and no one within sight but the comrade riding with me. One could get away from shams down there, Bobby, and live. Live." Her eyes were burning, and her cheeks were aflame.
"Bless her dear, restless heart,"
said the man who came often and knew her.
"We all want the gallop, but the sun down there is intolerable, and the grass burns up, and there's not a tree to cast a shadow. The life is rough, and the food is coarse, and the days are long and lonely. It's a big heart that is sufficient to itself, little woman, and we can't always be galloping across a green prairie on a cool, clear day, not even if one lives in Texas."
He had grown up again. Nancy's eyes were wistful. "I know. One never finds it anywhere, but one goes on wanting." And I liked the ring of my Texan's prairie song. A moment's silence, and Nancy continued. "He came to the house that evening. I went down to see him, and he stayed for half an hour. I don't think he said 5 words, but he sat, looking me straight in the face, with a queer doubt growing in his eyes. I didn't quite understand. I was horribly nervous. He wasn't like anyone else. I couldn't treat him as I treat other men. Suddenly he got up. He filled the room, Bobby. He didn't look at me then, but stared at an absurd Japanese bronze on the table. His lips were set in a straight line. There was something wrong with my breath, Bobby. A foolish thought that he looked rather like the head waiter, and Jack went floating through my head. And I wondered how women who have hysterics feel.
"I came up to ask you for something,"
he said.
"but I was a fool. I'll go back to Texas tonight. I've got to write it off. Goodbye."
He didn't even take my hand. He bolted, and I heard the door slam. Now an Eastern man. What would an Eastern man have done, Bobby?
"Held on like grim death and waited,"
said the man who came often. But he was sensible. Very sensible. One doesn't buy an impressionist's picture for one's living room. The academicians wear better, sighed Nancy. End of Chapter 6. Out of the West. I read a book I'm narrating at least 4 times by the time it's all said and done. So I have the advantage of catching things on subsequent readings that are harder to catch when a book is read just once. Did you pick up on Nancy's more serious observation about Bobby? I almost feel a book could be written about him. It'd be more earnest in nature, perhaps written by a Hemingway type. What do you think? How does he compare to the Texan? Or rather, contrast? Remember to catch the enrichment notes in the video that follows this one. This has been The Misdemeanors of Nancy by Eleanor Hoyt, illustrated by Penryn Stanlaws. Original copyright 1902. This work is in the public domain. Production copyright 2025 by Laura E. Richcreek. Thanks for listening. See you in the next video.